Niagara Falls might be all rainbows, romance, and Instagram-worthy views, but it's also hiding a seriously spooky side. In this video, we're diving headfirst, not literally, don't worry, into 5 jaw-dropping stories of real-life doom and gloom that happened right at the edge of this iconic waterfall. From freak accidents to mysterious disappearances, these tales prove that even the prettiest places can have a dark streak. It was July 5, 1930, and in Buffalo, New York, George Stthacis was cooking up something way spicier than his usual chef specials. At 46 years old, this Greek immigrant had dreams that went far beyond the kitchen. He wasn't just chasing clout. George was on a mission to launch both himself and his philosophical writings into fame, literally. His plan: ride over Niagara Falls in a giant homemade barrel to get rich, get published, and maybe even unlock the secrets of the universe while he's at it. You know, normal weekend stuff. Now, George wasn't some random thrill seeker. He was deep into mystical beliefs and thought this wild stunt would double as both a spiritual journey and a media magnet. He'd spent years writing about life, the cosmos, and probably the meaning of everything. But without cash or a publisher, his work was going nowhere. So, he figured, why not strap in, make history, and maybe score a book deal while he's at it? The idea of taking the plunge over Niagara Falls wasn't new. Daredevils had been testing their luck for decades. Some lived to brag about it, others not so much. But George was sure he had the secret formula. He designed a beast of a barrel, 10 feet long, over 5 feet wide, weighing nearly a ton, made of wood and steel, and packed with springs to soften the blow. Oh, and he had one single oxygen tank. One. Experts like Red Hill Sr., a Niagara rescue legend, warned him this was a disaster waiting to happen. But George, unbothered. He believed in fate and in his pet turtle. Yes, you read that right. George brought along his trusty turtle, Sunny, who was supposedly over 150 years old. George was convinced Sunny brought good luck, and who better to share a death-defying ride over a waterfall than a wise old reptile? At 2:30 p.m., a curious crowd gathered to watch the madness unfold. Tourists, journalists, and probably a few folks betting on the outcome all watched as George and Sunny's barrel was set adrift. It bobbed along the Niagara River, then whoosh, over the edge of Horseshoe Falls it went. The crowd gasped, the mist swallowed the barrel, and then, bam! It reappeared at the bottom, intact. The crowd roared, but the joy didn't last. The barrel wasn't drifting to safety. It was stuck, jammed behind the falls, pinned by powerful water and rocks. Inside, George was trapped in pitch blackness, deafened by the roar of the falls, oxygen running low. He'd told friends he had a 3-hour survival window. The barrel stayed stuck for 18. By the time rescuers got to it the next morning, it was too late. George had suffocated. His brave journey ended not with a splash, but with silence. Amazingly, Sunny the turtle survived the whole ordeal. Proof that maybe turtles really do have all the luck. As for the barrel, its very design, the thing meant to protect George, may have sealed his fate by being too big to escape the waterfall's grip. News of George's tragic attempt spread fast, even landing in the New York Times. People were torn. Some called him brave and visionary. Others called it foolishness, wrapped in steel and springs. Red Hill Sr. later retrieved the barrel and turned it into a tourist attraction. Today, it's part of a Niagara Falls exhibit, standing as a strange tribute to one man's wild dream. It was June 5, 1990. Niagara Falls was roaring like it always does, but that day, it was about to become the backdrop for one man's epic and slightly unhinged dream. Meet Jesse Sharp, a 28-year-old kayaking wizard from Ocoee, Tennessee. With over 10 years of hardcore river running under his belt, Jesse wasn't just some guy with a paddle and a wild idea. He was a seasoned pro who genuinely believed he could become the first person to kayak over Niagara Falls and walk away to tell the tale. Spoiler alert, things didn't go quite as planned. Now, Jesse didn't just wake up one morning and think, "Hey, I'll launch myself off a 167-foot waterfall today. Oh no, this was a well-researched, highly anticipated dinner reservation-making mission. That's right, Jesse actually booked a table at a restaurant in Lewiston, New York, because that's how confident he was he'd survive and casually roll up for a post-fall feast. He even parked his car nearby, ready for his victory cruise. He chose a Red Dancer C1 canoe. Technically a canoe, but people often mistake it for a kayak. Either way, it was his trusty steed for this aquatic stunt. Jesse had spent years studying the waterfall like it was the final boss in a video game. His plan, simple, in theory: paddle like mad toward the edge, go over at high speed, slice through the chaos below, and coast 4 miles downriver to glory. There was just one minor issue: safety gear. Jesse wasn't into it. No helmet, because hey, gotta let the cameras catch that winning smile. No life jacket, because he thought it'd mess with his quick escape if the boat flipped. Safety schmaffity. A few of his friends tagged along to document the plunge, though oddly, no footage has ever surfaced. As Jesse approached the infamous Horseshoe Falls, some workers at a hydroelectric station spotted him and frantically tried to cut the water flow, hoping to stop him, but Jesse was locked in. As he reached the edge, paddle raised like a gladiator, he disappeared into the spray at 1:45 p.m. Silence followed. Then, the watching crowd started searching the churning river below. Within minutes, Jesse's paddle bobbed to the surface. Then, his red kayak showed up, with just a small dent. But Jesse? Nowhere. The river kept its secret. Rescue teams sprang into action, but the area below the falls was a watery nightmare. Raging currents, unpredictable whirlpools, and zero visibility. Divers couldn't even try. Days turned into weeks. Jesse's body was never found. Some said it was pinned under the falls. Others guessed it drifted far downstream. Either way, he was gone. People reacted in all kinds of ways. Some hailed him as a daring adventurer who dared to test the impossible. Others thought he'd lost the plot completely. His friends remembered him as passionate, determined, and maybe a little obsessed. One buddy summed it up best: "In Whitewater, people say things are impossible until someone tries." Jesse became the 13th person to knowingly challenge Niagara's fury, but the first to do it in a kayak rather than a barrel or inflatable. Out of all the daredevils who faced the falls, 134 haven't lived to brag about it, including Jesse. His stunt led authorities to bump up the fines for such acts to a hefty $8,500. Experts later chimed in, kayaking over Niagara isn't just a gutsy challenge. It's practically a suicide mission unless you've got specialized gear and a miracle on your side. Jesse, unfortunately, had neither. Was it pure confidence, a hunger for greatness, or a bit of both? No one knows. And as for Jesse, he vanished into the mist, leaving behind a legend and a very empty dinner reservation. October 1st, 1995, was no ordinary day at Niagara Falls. Tourists were doing their usual oohs and ahs at the thundering Horseshoe Falls, snapping photos and trying not to drop their cameras in the spray. But amidst the fanny packs and rain ponchos, one guy stood out like a flamingo in a flock of pigeons: Robert Overhacker. This 39-year-old daredevil from Camarillo, California, was about to attempt the ultimate "look, Mom, no hands" stunt, not for fame, but to raise awareness about homelessness. His ride of choice, a jet ski, his parachute rocket-propelled, his nerves apparently made of steel. Robert wasn't just winging it. He'd graduated from stunt school. Yes, that's a real thing, and had been cooking up this plan for 7 years. Friends had talked him out of it before, but this time, he was locked in. No backing out. His jet ski proudly displayed a sign that read, "Save the homeless," turning his high-octane mission into a message. At precisely 12:35 p.m., Robert revved up his jet ski near the Canadian Niagara power plant. Clad in a wetsuit and rocking a custom parachute backpack, he zipped through the water with the confidence of a man who's watched a lot of action movies. His stepbrother and a close friend were in the crowd, cameras ready, hearts probably pounding. As he approached the edge of the massive waterfall, the crowd held its breath. Robert kept his cool, riding the wild current like a pro. Then, boom! He launched himself off the jet ski right at the brink of the 51-meter drop, triggering the rocket that was supposed to unleash his parachute. At first, it looked like it was working. Cheers, hope, maybe even applause. But then, disaster struck. The parachute separated from Robert's body instead of opening. Not ideal. Instead of a graceful glide to safety, Robert plummeted straight down into the churning chaos below. Cue chaos. The Maid of the Mist tour boat was nearby, and its crew sprang into action. At first, some folks thought they saw him swimming, but sadly, that hope was short-lived. His body was pulled from the water and brought ashore. Despite immediate help and a desperate rush to Greater Niagara General Hospital, Robert was declared dead an hour later. The impact had caused fatal injuries. Word of the tragedy spread faster than a tourist losing their hat in the wind. Some witnesses, still in shock, shared chilling accounts, like the person watching from a hotel balcony who thought Robert had nailed it, only to watch the scene unravel in horror. The footage of the failed stunt made the rounds, sparking debates on safety, risk, and what exactly went wrong. As it turned out, Robert hadn't packed the parachute himself. For a stunt that took 7 years to plan, that detail was a devastating oversight. His wife, Lori Overhacker, was left mourning not just the love of her life, but the weight of a dream that ended in tragedy. The couple had no children, and Lori now had to face a future shaped by one split-second malfunction. Robert's daring leap made him the 15th person since 1901 to intentionally go over Niagara Falls using some kind of contraption. Authorities weren't amused. Canada upped its fines for stunts like these to $10,000, while the U.S. took it even further, with penalties soaring to $225,000. Still, the falls keep luring daredevils like a moth to a very loud, very wet flame. Robert's story, while heartbreaking, reminds us that even the boldest acts, especially the ones with good intentions, carry enormous risk. And when Mother Nature's involved, she doesn't care how noble your cause is. Better triple-check that parachute. July 9th, 1960 started off like a chill Saturday by the water. 7-year-old Roger Woodward, his 17-year-old sister Deanne, and their family friend James Honeycutt were just out for a boat ride on the Niagara River. Nothing wild, just a little scenic cruising near one of the most thunderous waterfalls on Earth. What could possibly go wrong? James, a 40-year-old contractor and part-time boating enthusiast, had invited the kids for a relaxing float in his 14-foot aluminum boat. He was no reckless daredevil. He double-checked that the kids had their life jackets on because their parents weren't playing around with safety. The weather was good, the water was calm, and the vibe was pure summertime bliss. But about a mile from Horseshoe Falls, things went from pleasant boat ride to real quick. The motor conked out. Turns out a tiny propeller pin had broken. Just one of those small things that make a huge mess. James grabbed the oars and went full Olympic mode, rowing like his life depended on it. Spoiler, it did. Despite his best rowing skills, the Niagara current wasn't having it. The boat was being dragged toward the falls like a twig in a tornado. Realizing they were in deep trouble, James told the kids to hang tight and keep those life jackets on. Tragically, he didn't have one for himself, and there was no time to grab one. Then, the boat slammed into a rock and flipped, tossing everyone into the rapids. Deanne clung to the overturned boat, her knuckles probably turning white as she fought to stay above water. A wave yanked her under, and when she surfaced, she was scarily close to the very edge of the falls at Terrapin Point. That's when John Hayes, a truck driver and part-time hero, spotted her flailing. He climbed over a guardrail like an action movie star, hooked one leg through the bars, and yelled for her to swim. Deanne gave it everything she had. On the third try, she grabbed his hand. Another guy, John Quattrochi, rushed in to help pull her to safety, just 15 feet from a 167-foot drop. Meanwhile, poor Roger and James were still being swept closer and closer to the edge. The river finally tore them apart, and both went over the falls. Little Roger, all 46 pounds of him in a life vest, plummeted 167 feet, and survived. He didn't crash into the rocks, but landed in a pocket of deep water. The crew aboard the Maid of the Mist tour boat spotted him bobbing in the foamy chaos. Captain Clifford Key steered in, and after a few nerve-wracking attempts, they fished him out with a life ring. He was bruised, dazed, but alive, and only had minor injuries. Roger was whisked off to a hospital in Ontario, while Deanne was treated across the river in New York. Both kids recovered physically, though mentally. Yeah, probably not a boat fan for a while. Sadly, James Honeycutt didn't make it. He drowned in the rapids. His body was found 3 days later, about a quarter-mile downstream. But his quick thinking, insisting the kids wear life jackets, undoubtedly saved their lives. Roger became the first person known to survive an unplanned tumble over Niagara Falls without a barrel or stunt gear. Experts still call it the Niagara Miracle, and it's not hard to see why. It's a reminder that nature is powerful, unpredictable, and sometimes, just sometimes, it lets you walk away with a second chance. Let me tell you about a guy named Kirk Jones, a man who looked at Niagara Falls and said, "Yeah, I can take that." Not once, but twice. Yes, twice. Kirk was a thrill-seeking daredevil, or maybe just incredibly bold. Or bonkers, you decide. Back in 2003, at the age of 40, this Michigan man made international headlines by doing something that sounds like a bad idea, even in a dream. He became the first person to survive a trip over Niagara Falls with absolutely zero protective gear. No barrel, no helmet, not even floaties. Just him, gravity, and a whole lot of water. Now, let's pause here and consider the guts it takes to walk up to the edge of a 167-foot drop and think, well, here goes nothing. Kirk was reportedly having a rough time in life, and some think the jump may have been a desperate cry for help, but somehow, miraculously, he lived. He plunged down the monstrous Horseshoe Falls and popped out with only minor injuries, which is like jumping into a blender and coming out with a paper cut. Naturally, the media went wild. Kirk did the talk show circuit, gave interviews, and soaked in a bit of unexpected celebrity. For a moment, he was Niagara famous, but fame doesn't come without a price. Since the stunt was, well, illegal, Kirk got slapped with a fine and earned himself a lifetime ban from Canada, which, let's be honest, is kind of impressive in a weird way. Fast forward to 2017. Kirk, now 53, hadn't quite shaken off his waterfall fascination. He cooked up a new plan, one he thought would turn him into a legit stuntman and maybe even land him a gig in showbiz. The idea? Ride an inflatable plastic ball, the kind used in zorbing, right over Niagara Falls. But wait, there's more. Joining him on this trip, his pet boa constrictor, Misty. Because nothing says great life decisions like dragging your snake into a death-defying plunge. So Kirk buys a giant inflatable ball online, climbs in with Misty, and floats off toward destiny or disaster. The concept seemed simple. The ball would absorb the shock of the fall and keep him safe. Never mind the difference between rolling gently downhill and getting launched off a roaring waterfall the size of a skyscraper. He was committed. On launch day in April, bystanders saw the ball bouncing through the Niagara River's frothy chaos. But then, plot twist, things went sideways. The rapids were too strong. The ball spun like crazy, and according to reports, Kirk may have even been flung out before the ball reached the edge. When authorities finally recovered the ball downstream, it was empty. Rescue crews sprang into action, hoping for a second miracle. But this time, luck had left the building. On June 2, 2017, the U.S. Coast Guard recovered Kirk's body 12 miles downstream. Misty the snake, never found. Maybe she slithered away to start her own new life. Who knows? Kirk Jones, the man who once cheated death in the most dramatic way possible, was finally claimed by the force he had dared to challenge again. His first fall was the stuff of legends, a freakish miracle. But the second, a tragic attempt to recapture lightning in a bottle, with a snake and a plastic ball.